Hello everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Campaign Diary. It has been a bit since we last covered my D&D campaign Descent into the Veil, but we have returned for the 4th episode. The party is currently making their way through the Blighted Shore, a Wild West-themed arc for my campaign, and here we are going to finish it in today's episode. It is an exciting one, it is a bit dramatic, but I think you guys are going to enjoy it nonetheless. So without further ado, let's start by introducing the party. Taklak, the draconian sorcerer, hails from a distant kingdom and has come farther than most on the party. He's eternally inquisitive, an acolyte of the Platinum Guardian who works to study the arcane and protect his crew. Sometimes that means protecting them from themselves, or protecting them with extreme pyrotechnics.
Because I burn people in the name of Bahamut, that's why.
Eska and Desna Faye, chaotic drifters and Air Genasi twins who are not exactly the most orderly of individuals. Constantly competitive, but always forward in their attitude, they have saved the crew more than once with their eternal enthusiasm.
I feel like the artifact's just been chilling, he's not trying to make any more weird creatures, so maybe he likes us. What the fuck?
Sneak attack! Ah!
Freya Solveig, a storm-bound guardian and a former paladin of the Church of the Lightbound Eye. Freya's path has become muddled with uncertainty after leaving the church, but what is certain is she will deliver the Stormlord's wrath to whoever stands in the way of her or her party, and maybe get a souvenir on the way.
I ripped off the Inquisitor's earring from her dead body and I want to make it into a necklace.
And finally, Flint Strider, ranger pirate captain with a heart of gold who spends a lot more time thinking than talking, and more time shooting than both.
Damn, Crispy. Does everything have to be a mimic?
Alright, so to recap a little bit, the party, having retrieved their ship, the Jack Carlo, set sail for adventure, with their first destination being the Blighted Shore, a rugged frontier dominated by outlaws and cowboys who now apparently are wielding demonic magics. The Rooks are a gang of ruthless outlaws and thieves that have been harnessing the power of some sort of relic, using it to summon dark creatures of hell, and it's up to the party to stop them. The party arrived on the Blighted Shore, but they were surprised by not Rooks, but instead a mysterious woman in black who has been guiding their actions. She claims to know Flint Strider, the captain of the ship, in some way, but he himself cannot remember her. But her guidance has been helpful. She has led them to new allies, such as the old priest, Father Buell, and she has guided them to killing many Rooks. So, they continue to follow her instruction. Her latest directive is a strange one. They have been having success fighting Rooks on the western end of the shore, but she has directed them to the east to find a mysterious tower in search of forbidden knowledge, truth that they need to survive. The party are growing ever weary of this woman. Like I said in the last episode, I really like having these mysterious characters that seem to know more than they should. It can really be off-putting for players. Players like to be in the know, and when they feel like they aren't, it is a very uncomfortable feeling, especially if the villain seems to know more than them. And they don't even know if this woman is a villain or not. So far, she's been helping them, but who knows what her true intentions are. Nevertheless, they decide to head out toward the tower in search of knowledge, and really, in search of loot. Alright, we are going to pause from the story real quick to talk about game stuff, because here is where it's very, very important. The topic of the moment? Maps. I'm sure I've talked about maps before on this show, and if I haven't, I don't know why, because a big part of this campaign is the maps that I use. Since the beginning, I've been using Seiyan Peiku's maps, and they are so good. If I remember, I'll link their Patreon down below, but it is absolutely worth a sub. I pay $5 a month, and I get tons of high-quality maps every couple weeks. They are so good. I think a good map is essential for elevating your D&D game, and especially making it immersive. These next few encounters relied heavily on the geometry of the maps that Seinpeiku created, and I couldn't have come up with this stuff on my own. It's especially good because this entire encounter was inspired by just looking at the tower map. I loved it so much that I just designed all of this to fit it. They arrive at the tower and find it empty except for a corpse, a young mage's apprentice who has been chopped in half. It's clear that this is a mage's tower, and they found the apprentice, and he is incredibly dead, to say the least, but they hear voices in the distance as they are analyzing the tower, and it turns out that the Rooks are here, looking for perhaps the same things that the party seek themselves. In any case, they're the bad guys, and they have to die, so the party jump into action and quickly take care of the Rooks. This encounter is the first encounter of this dungeon, because, yeah, this is a dungeon. The tower is just the first area, and it's a pretty simple fight. The main force is a group of Gnoll druids. They're not really high-level druids. I believe they're like level 1 or 2 spellcasters. They weren't too threatening, but some spells to spice up the combat, as well as a tanky orc barbarian and a human bandit with gun. This threat was never meant to be too threatening. It's the first encounter after all, but I couldn't have planned it any better myself because the party all congregated inside the tower itself, and by a complete happenstance, I planned for the floor to give out under them. Now, because I always planned for the worst, I expected them to leave the tower and confront the Rooks outside and then come back inside to realize that the floor had caved in without them. But this was even more entertaining because they all fell down into the underground caverns beneath the tower, and it was a pretty exciting little thing. They took a little bit of fall damage, like 2d6 at most, not that much, but it resulted in them being trapped underground with these Rooks, who quickly decide to run off into the shadows and get killed by whatever is down here. That is a minor detail, by the way, but I did have the Rooks run off and get killed because I didn't want this little ad fight to last too long. We've got a full dungeon ahead of us to get through with no big boss, I will admit. Spoiler, 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 there's no real big boss. There's just a bunch of trash mob fights of varying levels of difficulty. But yeah, I didn't want this first one to last too long, and I felt like it was getting kind of forward in the rounds. The orc had a lot of health, and the party weren't rolling too well against him, so I had him run away and get eaten, and there was a couple other gnolls too, so I had them run off and get killed too, because, again, you need to pace your games, and this is an alright pacemaker. The party were clearly going to win this fight. It was obvious they were winning. I just wanted to speed it up a little bit so we can get to more exciting stuff. Speaking of that exciting stuff...
Oh, come on! It's these fucking things again.
The first encounter of this dungeon is Cranium Rats, an experiment from whatever mad mage was delving down here. And yeah, I love Cranium Rats. They are a great enemy. A Cranium Rat swarm is challenge rating 5, if I remember correctly, and that means that a couple of them can pose a danger to the party. Unfortunately, it's only going to really pose a danger to the party if the party are subjected to the Cranium Rat mind control. They are capable of mind whammying a party, and at the end of the day, the party had a paladin on their side. Freya Solvig can give bonuses to saving throws, and yeah, that meant that they were able to resist the Dominate Monster spell that the Cranium Rats had. What is this? That is the benefit of having a paladin, and you know what? They totally earned that. The last campaign, I actually used Cranium Rats on them, and they didn't have a paladin, and yeah, they got mind whammied, and it was a hard-ass fight. But here, they took that into account, now they're good at saving throws, and yeah, they get rewarded with some easy kills on some poultry rat experiments. Now, Flint, the pirate that he is, noticed that the map had some chests in it, and asked if he could open it, and of course, I said yes. The party warned him not to do that because this is a mad mage's area, and of course, where there is a mad mage who's very paranoid, there's probably going to be mimics, but he figured that there wasn't going to be mimics. It was a mimic. You hear Flint scream. It sounds gross. There's like blood everywhere.
I take it like a man, Chris.
Does anyone make a Constitution saving throw? Does anyone go and help him?
Oh my god. I walk up to him and I say you see it, and then I do
I got a 15.
lay on hands.
His arm is in the chest.
Yeah,
Oh, his
well-
arm's in the chest?
Yeah, it's biting into his arm.
I stab the arm, like not his arm, but like the thing that's like biting it?
You stab the chest?
Yes.
Okay, roll an attack. You yank your arm out, your coat sleeve is ruined.
No. My sick pirate code, Chris.
Freya cuts into stabs the chest in the wood, and you can see black blood pouring out of the chest. You pull away, and it reverts back into a normal chest.
Did I grab the healing potion at
Yep,
least?
you still have the healing potion.
Oh yeah. Alright, I try this chest.
Can I please slap him?
You slap Flint.
Yes.
No.
So yeah, that whole kerfuffle happened. I wouldn't exactly call it an encounter because it was wrapped up pretty quickly, but these little roleplay moments, they can really make a campaign. Especially when you're in a dungeon, you can forget about roleplaying. But when you remember to build a little bit of story while your party are traversing through the dark depths of whatever area they're in that day, I think that really builds on what D&D is. It's what makes the game fun for myself and for the people I play with. And yeah, this little encounter between Freya and Flint really built up both their characters, and it was incredibly fun. After the Mimic kerfuffle, they made their way through the caverns and found themselves fighting the second enemy, an Umber Hulk that had dug its way up from the Underdark. This thing was no joke, and it has some pretty neat abilities that I completely forgot about. I remember them being the big brutes that beat up Vox Machina in their first arc of Critical Role Campaign 1, but I completely forgot that they have some confusion powers, and when I was reading that during prep, I was very intrigued. I was interested to see how it would play out, and I was a little bit more strategic this time. I moved the party away from Freya so that she couldn't buff their saving throws, and therefore the Umber Hulk was actually able to confuse some players. It can do it with just a gaze, which is a pretty powerful ability. Freya herself was saved, but a lot of the party members that were separated from her, not so lucky, and it caused some, well, confusion among the party, which is pretty chaotic in the heat of the fight. They did manage to do enough damage to it that it ran away, at least for now, but it did a good chunk of damage to the party for one monster. They moved on, found some more chests. Freya beat up Flint a little bit as he tried to open them, but after a few more scuffles, they moved their way through the dungeon and found their destination. This whole time, Freya has been using Detect Good and Evil to sense necrotic magics, and she detected it strongly from the wizard's room? Experiment room? Library? I didn't know what to call it. It's the area where all the bad stuff is. That's all that matters. That's a serious tip, guys. You don't need to flesh out every little detail. I mean, this is a cavernous region underneath this tower with tons and tons of rooms. I don't have labels for every single one of them, and I really don't need to have labels for every single one of them. There's chests in this room, there's a bed in this room, who knows what it's used for. The party can make their own assessments, and I'll give the best answers I can in the moment. But yes, moving on, they find the source of the magic, but are interrupted by that same Umber Hulk, joined by a second Umber Hulk.
Oh, Lord.
I mean, one Umber Hulk wasn't posing too much of a challenge, so I decided to throw in another one. I do like combat being tight to the wire, and this combat was pretty close to the wire, to say the least. The party had to contend with both Umber Hulks doing their confusion move, and had to be creative with their positioning. They tried to center around Freya so they could have advantage on saving throws and such, and it resulted in a lot more strategy than the party usually need to do. I like it when they need to think during a battle, and simple things like Umber Hulks giving confusion can push players into thinking strategically. One thing I've learned about my players that might apply to your players, they hate debuffs and will do anything to avoid them. So using debuffs to force players into thinking strategically or force players into fighting ads or trash mobs you throw in during a boss fight, that might not be a bad idea, and I'm probably going to use that tip later on down the campaign. But anyway, the Umber Hulks are defeated because, you know, the party is awesome. The party make their way into the mysterious room filled with dark magics, and they find the mad scrawlings of a mage. Now, this is all foreshadowing for a future storyline that I haven't talked about much. This entire time, the main arc of Desna and Escafé has revolved around a mysterious man named Cain Miva, who showed up briefly at the beginning of this whole show, probably under a different name because I messed up during the recording. But yeah, he's the one that gave them the marks on their hands, and he seems pretty evil to say the least. This mad mage was doing research on this figure, so it allowed me to give a little bit of foreshadowing towards his presence and to exemplify how powerful he is. This incredibly powerful mage was terrified of this guy. They actually do find the mage. He has hidden his soul inside of a jar because he's that afraid of this Cain Miva figure, and the second they release him, the marks on Desna and Eska's hands glow, and the spirit dissipates with a scream, fulfilling some sort of promise that Cain made to this mage without the party's knowledge. It enforced that this guy is powerful beyond what they comprehend right now, and enforced that he may be a threat for later on down the line. You don't want your party to forget about your bad guys. That's never a good thing. But anyway, after that possibly traumatizing experience for the characters, they leave Badger Hill behind with a little bit of extra loot, including the jar that the mage was hiding inside of. The hideaway jar, which doesn't just hide your soul, it can also hide the actual physical you. It's an item I found on Griffin's Saddlebag, and I really like the flavor of it, so I decided to add it into the campaign. I thought this session was really fun. It was a side quest just to foreshadow future events in the campaign, but nevertheless, I thought it was a good time, and so did the party. The mechanics were fun, the fights were interesting but not too intense, and the lore was intriguing for the players. They're invested in both the characters of the Woman in Black as well as Cain Miva. Both are interesting to them, and this quest builds a connection between the two. Why did she send them here? Does she have some sort of relation to Cain Miva? Is he the brother that she mentioned earlier in the campaign? Who knows? Well, I mean, I know, but my party watched the show, so, can't tell you guys, sorry. Anyway, the party returned to the Jack Carlo and their crew to get back on track. Turns out the Jack Carlo has moved. Some of their new outlaw allies have found them a better location in the form of a ruined village to hide out in while they plan their move against the Rooks. They have killed quite a few of them at this point, and with their extra help, the party may be able to storm the Rook's hideout of Outlaw's Respite and take them out for good. We could free the Blighted Shore, right now.
True.
That sounds like a good
But
idea.
Jaren Rook also, kicked our asses. So,
I'm bringing my whole crew.
that is
Everybody.
also fair.
And also, you didn't have all your guys when you fought him last. You were down too.
True.
That is
Guys.
No comment.
That's my comment.
It's awesome
You hear,
with you.
and you look out, and you see, somebody riding in. And even though you don't recognize the person immediately, you do recognize the two horses that accompany them. It's Oatmeal and Appa.
What the fuck?
Yeah. Wait, Christine.
You see what you assume to be Jangu riding in with Oatmeal and Guy. And you're happy to see your horses again. They ride closer and you realize that there's something different about him. You notice that he's not waving back at Caroline. In fact, he's
dead.
not moving at all.
No,
His skin
no, Chris.
looks
No.
paler than it was before.
This
And then
is-
you realize, and he rides in, you realize that his skin isn't paler. His skin has been removed. He's been
That's
flayed
worse,
from
Chris.
top
Hey,
to
what
bottom.
the fuck?
His skin draped onto the horse. As he rides closer to Caroline and Charlotte, Charlotte screams in anguish as she sees the corpse. And you see something on the ridge behind the corpse of Jangu. You see a line of rooks lining up outside the town. You see everyone in the town hold their breath, grabbing their weapons. As the rooks descend upon you, and as all hell breaks loose, I'm gonna need you guys to roll initiative. Now, this whole thing is heavily inspired by Red Dead Redemption. I make no secret of that, and this fight was especially inspired by Red Dead Redemption. The opening is an obvious homage to RDR2 and the death of one of the gang members in that game who rides in on a horse without his head. In this game, he rides in on a horse without any of his skin, and yeah, it is the bard that the party met, I believe, 2 episodes ago in a different city, Novasante, and he was a minor character, but he had some fun interaction with the party, so I was comfortable killing him off screen. I don't want to kill beloved NPCs off screen too often because it feels cheap. I'm not above killing off NPCs at all, especially beloved NPCs. I think that if the story calls for it and if the party can't save them, they should be able to die. But at the same time, I shouldn't do it off screen because that's cheap. Jengu, however, the poor bard, he was a minor character, and while the party did like him, I thought that his death would make this fight ever more dangerous. And it was dangerous. They are facing rooks in the form of a couple of gunslingers as well as a tabaxi rogue. And yeah, rogues don't mess around. I mean, DMs know that, and when you give an enemy sneak attack, it can be incredibly deadly. Not only that, but Hellhounds joined them in this fight, and Hellhounds, despite being normally a trash mob, they are pretty formidable, especially when you're only like level 5, level 6 at this point. They don't mess around either. You hear what sounds like barking coming from behind the house where Eska, behind the house where Eska is standing on. It gets louder and louder until a huge demon dog crashes through the building and slams through the building. Eska, you grab onto a piece of the rafter and you hold yourself up. You do not fall off the building. This creature is a Shasuva and it crashes right through the building and it enters a fight with Desna.
Why? Why me?
To top it all off, a Shasuva burst through the village and attacked the party as well. This fight has a lot going on, and I am aware that it is a lot, but they do have some NPC help, and at this point the party are fully rested. They had been taking care of every threat in front of them pretty handily so far, but this proved to be a lot for them. They were doing really well though. Rooks were dying to their blades and to their shots. They took out a couple Hellhounds. The Shasuva was a problem though, but Eska managed to use her Air Genasi abilities to keep it distracted using some very clever mobility. So yeah, it was all going pretty well. Midway through the fight, people are looking weak. Party members are not able to get off Cure Wound spells because, well, they're all separated. And something quite unexpected happens. Freya gets cornered by a couple rooks. She takes out one, but she's still flanked. The rogue managed to get off a sneak attack and rolls really high damage. And I had no idea that Freya, at that point, had almost no health.
Crispy, I'm negative what my normal health is.
What?
What?
Wait, does that mean she's dead?
Wait, what
Like
the
dead?
Shut up.
Because the rogue rolled such high damage, he rolled above her max hit points, and, well, he killed her. Yeah, that was hard. That was rough. I have never killed a player character like that. No resurrections, no nothing. Completely out of nowhere. I had no idea it was even coming. When I heard her say, "I'm dead," my heart stopped. Like it skipped a beat, and I was sweating bullets. It was rough, but it's rolled dice. I already said it, and I can't take it back. And frankly, I shouldn't take it back. This added a lot of weight to that game, and man, after she died, I really struggled to continue the session. I mean, emotions were running a little bit high with all of us, and I know someone's gonna be like, "Oh my gosh, it's just a game, guys. Like, what's wrong with you? That's so dumb." But guys, I mean, we have been playing these characters for a while. We're all best friends, and we love this game. And when something like that happens, I mean, it affects all of us, not just the player and the DM. But after that, I had to have the fun conversation with Kyla, the player behind Freya, about her death and about a new character, because, yeah, that's what you have to do when your character dies. And we ended up coming up with something pretty damn awesome. Although Freya will always be missed. I am still a little bit sad about that. I had a lot of ideas for where Freya's story could take her. I mean, this paladin who has left the church and is now fighting against them. She's got this awesome badass samurai aesthetic. I like that character, but unfortunately, she is gone now, and I think her story has concluded. I think that this is a decent benchmark for how I'm going to deal with character death in the future, because, yeah, this is a bit more of a rough campaign. There's no clerics to resurrect anybody, and I really like that. I mean, it's a bit more boots on the ground than my last game, which was very high fantasy, legendary heroes fighting against Titanic gods and all that. This is a bit more boots on the ground, and I really like that about this game. And of course, a character death, I think, really, really solidifies that. I think the most important part of this was that I talked to Kyla. We talked after the game. We made sure that everyone was good with this event. And at the end of the day, we created an awesome new character for her to play. A character that she loves just as much. Well, death, that's fun. Anyway, let's move on to the next session, where the party, they're pissed. Freya is dead, the Rooks have killed her, and they are out for revenge. They're bleeding a little bit, but they're not out of the game yet. They gather their crew, but the crew, they're not feeling it anymore. 2 members of the crew are dead now, Freya being one of the most powerful members of the party, and now they don't know what to do. I was genuinely surprised when the party was considering running away, but they ended up staying because, they're heroes and they need to save the day, and also, vengeance is a great motivator. They travel to the Rook's hideout and confront them there. While their outlaw allies distract the Rooks at the front door, the party are going to sneak around the back and claw their way inside. And they end up finding a new ally to aid them, Talia Fairchild. You hear like a cat, and you hear like some growls. You recognize the sound as some sort of undead creature, and you're all very confused, and then as you hear this cat's meowing get louder and louder, and then like what sounds like a large flame get produced. Meanwhile, Talia, you have been on quite the adventure ever since dropping out of school. It has been a long time. You set out to prove that you could do this whole artificer thing without those rich assholes in the academy.
Wait, what?
But I mean, being on your own in the wild for months, you almost missed the cafeteria food. As you were traveling, you heard tell of outlaws with powerful technologies hiding out south of Beggar's Gulch. And you decided, hell yeah, I'm gonna go get that shit. So you snuck in, but unfortunately, you are not very sneaky, just like when you tried to graffiti Mrs. Norris's office with tons of inappropriate pictures. You once again have been very, very caught as you try to sneak in and immediately were confronted by very gangly looking zombies. You also hear somebody opening the door in the room next to you, and now you're incredibly confused as a strange-looking lizard dog thing is looking into the room. And with that, I'm going to need all of you, including Talia, to roll initiative. Talia is an artificer. I've never had an artificer in any of my games, and I was really excited when she was interested in this class. She is a student of Bothwell Academy. The name is taken from a live-action roleplay, totally stolen. No shame there. It's a cool name. I don't know what to tell you. She is no longer a student, of course, because she wanted to go on an adventure. She dropped out, and now she is out in the world trying to prove that her inventions are worthy of spotlight. She also has an eldritch cannon shaped like a robot cat. It's the small things, Nice, simple character backstory, fun motivation, it's got the works. The party end up getting along with Talia and helping her in her plight. She came here looking for materials for new magical inventions. Instead, she found a bunch of rooks. She thinks they're hiding something important, but, well, she's gonna need some help to find it. That is where the party come in. They help her, and while there is some friendly fire exchange, because I didn't understand that the catapult spell is a dex saving throw, not a spell attack, because I'm a moron, the encounter ends with a party victory, and Talia ends up joining them on their adventure. Now, the Rook Hideout was an amazing dungeon. I love this map from Seinpeiku. It's the Rogue Hideout, and it is a great map. Now, it's intended to have secret passages and corridors, but I ended up just making them normal passages and corridors because, again, we've only got a couple hours and there's a lot of fighting to get through. The Rooks have filled this place with deadly monsters, and it's also filled with outlaws that need killing. So, yeah, I wanted to make it a little bit more simple for the party. We just had a crazy, mysterious dungeon delve like 2 sessions prior, and I didn't want to become repetitive. The enemies in this dungeon are a Best of the Rooks montage because we're reaching the end of the Rooks story, and they've been a major antagonist throughout the campaign for a bit. They're not the BBEG faction, but they have popped up quite a few times, and the party have been fighting them for quite a bit. They're also the only demon-related thing in this whole campaign as far as I'm concerned. I've planned out most of how this game is going to go, and yeah, this is the only time demons are going to pop up in this game because I don't have any role for them planned in the future. So I wanted to give all these cool demonic monsters a little bit of a send-off in this dungeon. We had all types of different monsters here, not just demons, but also like ghasts and oni popped up. It was really great. The final fight was not against Jaren Rook, the BBEG of this arc, the leader of the Rooks. He ran away and left the party with his lackeys.
I will admit, I'd love to stick around, but I've got other things to attend to. Boys, kill him.
The Shashuva from the previous battle, which they still hadn't killed, an Oni, as well as the Tabaxi rogue that killed Freya. With Talia by their side, the party did stand a chance against these foes. However, it was really rough. This was a difficult fight. Shasuvas are no joke. It is a pretty high challenge rating monster, especially for, I believe, a level 6 party. It was nerfed quite a bit in both fights. However, it's still pretty formidable. Oni too. The rogue was taken care of, actually, I believe, first. Probably because the party really don't like that guy. But yeah, they managed to clear out those monsters, and with that, they finished off the Rooks. Of course, not truly finished off, because Jaren is still alive. Could they let him fade into obscurity? Sure, but they're not going to take that risk, and like I said earlier, revenge is a hell of a motivator. So, they mount up and go after Jaren by nightfall. After a bit of a ride, the newly formed party find him on a cliff overlooking the ocean, and they prepare for the final play for the Blighted Shore. This battle was epic. At this point, it was by far my favorite encounter in the entire campaign. A big reason as to why was the music. Music can make a boss fight. In this fight, I used the song American Venom, and it was perfect for this boss. It perfectly encapsulated the entire western feel of this arc. And yeah, if you've heard the song American Venom, I might put it in this actual video. If you've heard the song, you know that this is amazing as a final boss theme, especially when it comes to taking revenge. The party fought Jaren, and he has some pretty powerful abilities. Again, he's got some Bodak abilities on him, which means he has like a Death Gaze, which deals damage if you're in eye contact with him. He can also use a Demonic Gaze to reduce you to 0 hit points automatically if you fail to save by too much. I believe it's fail to save by 5 or more. And of course, he's got gun. He's a cowboy. He has a gun. Now, I let the party take a rest before they came here because I wanted them to be at full power to face Jaren. I don't know if that's cheap or if that's lame, but I thought it would make the fight more enjoyable. I also balanced Jaren around a fully rested party, so yeah, I wanted it to be balanced in that way. And I think the party, since they rode for so long to get here, I think it's realistic they would have taken a rest. But Jaren did not just have gun and death gaze up his sleeve, he transformed midway through the fight because I'm crispy and I love multi-phase battles. Jaren's second form was a Titanic Demon. I mean, Titanic is a bit of an exaggeration, I just like the word. He was only about 10-15 feet tall, but he was still quite intimidating. At this point, he ditches his revolver and switches to pure spell casting, and his death gaze transforms into a different attack. Instead of a continuous gaze that just happens on each player turn, now, at the beginning of his turn, he expels a ton of necrotic energy, dealing a ton of damage to everyone who isn't standing in a patch of light. Now, earlier in the fight, I established that his minions, his fellow rooks, when they were killed, they dropped torches on the ground. I marked these on the Foundry map with a little light source. I love using the lights in Foundry to indicate a mechanic, because to the party, I mean, they're very noticeable, so for them, they can easily see when a mechanic is in place. This turned the fight into a bit more of a strategic one. Again, chasing your party up a tree, forcing them to care about the mechanics. There are times where I'm okay with the party just tanking it through the fight, but this is the final boss of the arc. I want them to engage a little bit more with the battle. So, by doing this, it forces them to think about their positioning. Now, not only do they need to worry about dealing damage to Jaren, but also being able to sit in the pools of light at the end of their turn, so when Jaren expels the necrotic energy, they don't take the heavy bulk of damage. This was definitely a problem for Desna, the monk, because he has to do melee attacks. However, thanks to an infused magic item by Talia, it allowed Desna to teleport backwards 15 feet after he takes his movement. So that allows him to effectively avoid attacks of opportunity, which, you know what, I was happy with. That was a well thought out infusion from Talia, the Artificer, and you know what? That is exactly what the Artificer class should be used for. So I was incredibly happy when those boots came into use during this fight. After the first few necrotic bursts, they managed to get the mechanic under control. They managed to figure out how it works and deal some serious damage from range, with Desna teleporting backwards to avoid attacks of opportunity. Now, Jaren still has access to some gnarly spells. I gave him a wizard spell list with a lot of fire-dealing damage spells. However, in terms of dex save spells, Desna and Eska, the monk and the rogue, they have evasion, which essentially gimps those spells. I didn't even think of that, and it's definitely something I'm going to take into consideration later on. However, yeah, it allowed them to avoid a lot of damage. Some other party members, not so fortunate. Poor Taklak took a necrotic burst and then a firebolt, which definitely hurt him, especially since he was already hurt from some trash mobs earlier in the fight. But after a long-fought battle, Talia, the party's newest member, the young Artificer student, managed to use a well-placed catapult to throw her own shoe at Jaren, because she actually goes out of her way to describe what she's throwing with her spells, and yeah, her boot stuck itself into Jaren's head, effectively killing him. The party are victorious. The Blighted Shore is free from the influence of the Rook gang. This is the party's first true win. Markov Sterik in episode 2 of this series, a vampire, yeah, they killed that guy, but his remaining vampire allies in the Engelfall Brood would have hunted them down if they stayed in the city. They had to flee. Inquisitor Kazumane is another big bad that they killed, but again, her allies would have hunted them down if they didn't flee away from the city. So yeah, they wanted to have a bit more of a solid win on their hands, and this was it. Of course, it didn't come without its complications. Talia found the relic she was looking for, and it wasn't exactly something that she wanted to keep. The power that the Rooks were using to summon these demons, these undead, was none other than the Horn of Orcas itself. No one really knows what happened to it. Many adventurers have sought the fabled Horn of Orcas, but none have found it. This horn must have traveled here to Aora, the continent you're currently on, across the sea, somehow through the Veil, and has ended up here. You are looking at the fabled Horn of Orcas, the last remnant of the fallen god who tried to invade your world.
Well,
I don't think we should put that on our boat.
we better take that.
With the shadow crystal, yes.
With the music box,
Yes.
great idea,
With
guys.
the music
We
box
got a whole
in the
little
chest.
collection of secret little artifacts.
Now, this is actually a reference to my first campaign. In the first campaign, the party fought Orcas as the BBEG, and in that fight, the party Bloodhunter shot Orcas's horn off of his head during their final confrontation. This is an example of taking advantage of meta-knowledge. Of course, the party, the characters, they know who Orcas is. He's quite a famous figure in history. However, they don't know everything about him. They aren't fully aware of the power of this horn and how dangerous it is. Of course, the players, the people themselves, they fought Orcas as their previous characters. They are well aware of how bad this artifact is. And of course, I allowed for some arcana and history checks so that the party, the characters, can also catch up and learn that, yeah, this horn, it's bad news. At this point, the party have two very dangerous relics stuck on their ship. The Horn of Orcas and the music box of the void that they found in, I believe, episode 2. Both are dangerous and bad. The Horn of Orcas summons demons, the music box summons creatures of the void, aberrations from beyond space and time. Neither are good, and they gotta get rid of both. And luckily, Talia is a student at the Bothwell Academy of the Arcane, a place that would probably be more than happy to house such magical relics. With their destination set, the party head off to adventures anew. But that is where we are going to pick up next episode. Okay, so that is the story complete. What are the lessons that I learned from the Blighted Shore arc? This is the biggest arc that I've done, and I believe any of my campaigns. This thing lasted about 6 sessions. That's pretty long for me. I usually try to wrap them up after 3 or 4. So how did this arc go? I think that it was really, really good. It began really well, and then in the second session of it, it dropped off hard. I had a couple rough sessions where I didn't really know where to take the story. I had the rough bullet points, like I knew that I wanted a western-based battle against Jaren Rook and his gang, influenced by a little bit of demon magic, and throw in some western mysticism and maybe some side quests to build up the larger narrative of the world. Those are all great goals. However, every single one of those goals are kinda hard to fulfill if you don't have a concrete plan. And those couple rough sessions, that's the point where I didn't have a concrete plan. In the very first episode of Crispy's Tavern ever, I talked about how a lot of my notes revolve around goals. And in this arc, I really learned the flaw of that mindset, or at least the flaw of having just that mindset and just that mindset alone. Having goals are great, but you need to figure out a way to fulfill those goals in order for them to actually work out in gameplay. And after those couple rough sessions, I started to be a little bit more specific with how I took my notes and how I developed the story and the paths I gave to the players. There was still a lot of choice for them. However, I wasn't so open that they didn't know what to do. There were points in those 2 rough sessions where they didn't know what they wanted to do. There were so many options, it was so open that they were kind of directionless. So I gave them a little bit of direction, a little bit of a nudge towards experiences I thought they'd enjoy, and they ended up enjoying it a lot more. The Western vibe of this game was awesome. I loved this arc just for the music and the environment and everything. I want to come back to this location just so I have an excuse to use some of the Red Dead Redemption 2 soundtrack mixes that I put together in Audacity just for this. It was so fun. Overall, this arc had its flaws, but at this point, it was my favorite part of this campaign by far. For every flaw that it had also great moments, not only for myself, but for the players, and I'm really happy with how the game turned out. And I hope that you guys learned something from it. If you guys enjoyed, then please do leave a like. If you want to see more of my content, then head into the cards where you can find our RPG horror story series where we talk about the best, the worst of Dungeons and Dragons. And while you're there, subscribe to Crispy's Tavern to get more of our content right as it comes out. And finally, if you want to leave your own stories or thoughts, go down into the comments down below. If you can't think of a comment, leave the comment, the final play, to let me know you made it to the end of the video. In essence, like, comment, subscribe. I will see you all next time. Farewell.